got Nathan coming up, spreading treats, not tricks. Email engagements, do's and don'ts for better deliverability. Super excited about this. He's the senior deliverability strategist over at Blue Shift. Sorry, I'm distracted by my own costume because I love this thing so much. It's my favorite hot sauce in the world. So anyway, yeah, we've got Nathan coming up next, y'all. This is a pre-recorded session, so Nathan is going to join us at the end for some Q&A. I'm super excited about that. So let's go ahead and get Nathan's session started, shall we? All right, let's get some excitement going on in the chat, y'all. Let me see some emojis. Let me see some spooks. Let me see some jack-o'-lanterns and some ghosts. That's what I'm talking about, y'all. See you in a little bit.
All right, so thank you all for joining today and being willing to listen to me ramble on a little bit about deliverability. That said, welcome to this session. And as mentioned, this is email engagement do's and don'ts for better deliverability. So before we get started, I just want to give myself a brief introduction. My name is Nathan Sheen. As you can see, I've had an eclectic career in email. I began my journey at MailChimp, where I learned a little bit how email works and how an ESP functions. I then moved to ClubCore and got a glimpse of how email works on the marketing side of things. And I followed that into managing a team of deliverability experts at an agency. Now, finally, I found my home here at Blue Shift, where I've been able to sort of compile all of that into a single role. All that said, I've been in most of everyone's email shoes, albeit they all didn't fit perfectly snug. All right, so talking a little bit about our agenda, we're going to be talking first about how to define email engagement. Then we'll move into those engagement do's and don'ts, then talk a little bit about future of engagement, and lastly, we'll have some time for questions. All right, so our first section for the definition of email engagement. So what is engagement? It seems elementary, but let's run through what the basic metrics are for engagement. Opens and clicks, of course, these are the marketer's standard KPIs for their subscribers. It's all the good stuff, all that good positive engagement. The negatives are reporting an email as spam or phishing. And lastly, neutral would be those standard unsubscribes. I put unsubscribes here in the neutral category, as ISPs don't really weigh this type of engagement nearly as negatively as before. Obviously, this is to a certain extent. If you are seeing unsubscribes significantly over 1%, 2% into the 5% range, this could likely move into that negative column. But overall, we prefer to see unsubs than complaints. All right, so with all that being said, let's redefine this a little bit. So engagement at its core, as I mentioned, is how we define how a subscriber interacts with their email, but let's broaden that definition to become smarter senders. Not only should we analyze how a subscriber engages, but engagement from the ISP and how the platforms actually view you and engage with you as well. So as we see here, read, delete, and read plus delete, there are some platforms that offer what is called panel data that can provide some additional insights, such as these three figures. Reading an email is obviously positive. That means when a subscriber opens your email, scrolls through there, and hangs out for maybe 8 to 10 seconds, and that's what counts as an actual read. And so let's talk a little bit about the other additional items in each column. So for the positive side of things, the signups, website interaction, website purchases. The signup obviously is what leads you to being able to send an email to somebody. And the website interactions may not necessarily pertain to an email interaction, but maybe actions that follow an email interaction. But overall, these are all metrics that can be logged, have a specific action on the subscriber's end that is a positive action. So moving into the negative side, I did add the delete and hard bounces here. Delete, obviously, if someone deletes the email without opening it just right off the bat, that's obviously negative. But hard bounces, I did put an asterisk here just because there's depending on what platform you use or the varying definition SMTP, codes that come with it, inbox full or invalid email, they can all be categorized as hard bounces. But in general, for me, I define a hard bounce as if an email is very, very unlikely to ever make it to that inbox. And then moving on to the neutral side of things, the read plus delete. So reading is obviously mentioned as positive, delete is negative. So the read plus delete is sort of in that middle ground. It's not good, it's not bad, but if anything, it is venturing more so on the side of positive. And similarly here, I put soft bounces with an asterisk, as soft bounces, again, have many definitions. But there is an interesting use case that if you send to a domain that doesn't exist, it can sometimes come back as a hard bounce or a soft bounce, but it's not inherently negative because there's no ISP that actually you're sending to give you sort of a negative mark. So moving into those engagement do's and don'ts. So brainful or mindful marketing. How do you put your email program in the best position before hitting send? So here, gather all the data and log it accordingly. What I mean to say here is that all that data we just spoke about, the positive, the negative, the neutral columns, be able to not only see that data, but store it in a way that you can actually use it. We've all seen the spreadsheets and databases of insightful information that just sort of sits there and rots. It's tough to pay for all these different platforms and all these different ways to log data just for it to be underutilized. Secondly, establish your sender reputation before your busiest season. I mentioned this as it is not uncommon for organizations to attempt to migrate sending platforms late in Q3 or even in Q4. While it isn't impossible to do this successfully, it is just really difficult and doesn't leave you a lot of room for error should anything come up. Should we see some blocks or reputation dip, there's just not a lot of time to fix it. So if you are able to plan ahead, always try and migrate and build reputation through the first 3 quarters of the year. Give yourself time to remediate, as I mentioned. Should any issues come up, and really not hinder, that important revenue for that particular quarter. And this is sort of under the assumption that your industry is focused on the holiday season. But if you're in the swimsuit industry or something like that, this could obviously vary for you. And if you're planning to migrate ESPs, think about your infrastructure thoroughly. So this works sort of in tandem with the item above, in that when you migrate, be sure to think really, really thoroughly about how many IPs your program will need, what subdomains you will be using, and if you have multiple content streams and how those will be handled. Are they going to be on individual dedicated IPs? Are they going to be on shared IPs? What have you? I've just seen many cases where a team is really rushing to get a migration complete, only to not have thought the process through, and didn't think about the scalability of what they signed up for. And then maybe they use one IP sending from their parent domain, and then once they're done, they realize they're going to have to make some changes. So save yourself some time in the long run by really thinking through those potential roadblocks now. All right, so moving into drawing out positive engagement. How do you get your subscribers to really come alive? So put yourself in your subscribers' shoes. Think about how you as a consumer would feel if you received an email that you're planning to send out. That's like the cadence, the time of day, the content, how the content looks, the tone of the content, the length of the email, etc. So building on the cadence and time of day, this is, subscriber exhaustion, it really is a real thing. So be really cognizant of how often and when you are sending. High level, studies have shown that roughly Tuesday to Thursday are the ideal send days. While, unsurprisingly, Mondays and Fridays are not great. I don't know about everybody else, but sometimes Mondays and Fridays it takes a little time to get started, and email may not be the priority at that time. But yeah, and I guess additionally there, combine that knowledge with knowing, what times of the day are pertinent, what times of the day work the best for your industry. But in general, that 11 to noon reports the highest engagement, right before lunch. So think about segmentation in a new light. We've come a long way since traditional batch and blast. We're not done with segmentation yet. Similar to that first item, put yourselves in your consumer's shoes and think about what you would appreciate most, from an email. More often than not, me specifically, when I see an email come in from something I recently purchased, it's when they're able to provide content to me that seems very personal, very catered. It's more than just saying, "Hey Nathan, you may like this," but having a list of things that seem like they went out of their way to cater to me. Say I bought a book last week. Granted, I likely won't finish that book by this week, but if I get an email this week, maybe it has other books in the same genre. Other books, maybe the sequel to the book that I'm reading right now. Having those specific experiences are what is going to deter me from reporting as spam, unsubscribing, because I feel like this particular company really cares about me as an individual. And lastly here, understand deliverability recommendations, but tie it back to your industry. So this is a really big one. While there are some general rules of thumb for deliverability, that doesn't mean they'll always work for your specific industry. I work with financial institutions, insurance companies, to mom and pop shops, and the sort of target this audience, or do not send anyone who hasn't engaged in this amount of time, it doesn't always fit. So let's say your organization is a financial institution that connects subscribers to loan vendors. Do we necessarily want to continuously bombard latest engagers who possibly already have acquired a loan? The better question is, are you tracking individuals who have acquired that loan within your email infrastructure so that we can make those segments a little bit better? Additionally, it's also important to it's still important to take recommendations from deliverability strategists, deliverability teams to heart, but definitely have further discussions, so how those particular recommendations work within your specific sending infrastructure. All right, so don't be in the dark or afraid of it. Always stay informed on the industry and your email program. Starting off, know your list sources. As an organization grows, there will be more hands in the cookie jar that is your email program. Being aware of how emails get added to your list is really key to keeping reputation and engagement high. So be sure to know if Bob Smith, Susan Jones, whoever is adding a few hundred, 1,000 addresses, that are surefire sales, surefire leads, that they may be scraped from your local elementary school directory. It sounds crazy, but I've seen it done. Additionally, be organized with your sign-up list and where they live. Also, as tempting as it is for those single opt-in forms, please don't do it. Do yourself a big favor, move them to double opt-in, and also have honeypots or live list validation services tied to it. This will prevent a lot of headache in the event some malicious actors try to bomb your list with fake addresses. Again, this is from personal experiences. You may gather some additional addresses here and there from single signups, but the risk of ruining your list or having just fake addresses get there, it's not worth it. So don't forget about DMARC. Not just the policy itself, but the reporting platform that you may be sending those forensic or aggregate reports to. It's excellent. It's always excellent to see marketers take that first step and implement DMARC, implement the added security, on their parent domain or their bulk sending domains. But oftentimes it sort of stops short of the real purpose of DMARC. So don't let DMARC fall to the wayside, leaving that policy on observation mode, that P equals none. However, if you have gone the extra mile of testing and setting up P equals quarantine or P equals reject policy, it's a good idea to keep regular cadence of checking in on those reports to see if there are any bad actors trying to pretend to be you. Especially at this time of the year, keep an eye on it as we move into some of those busiest quarters. And lastly, don't neglect list health and perform hygiene regularly. As deliverability strategists, I can't emphasize list hygiene enough, but my team understands it isn't always feasible to to run your sort of entire audience through these platforms. We know it can get pricey. But if that is the case, focus on addresses that are of concern or that have engaged in, say, 3 to 6 months. Focus on those that you're looking to send to, but you got a question mark next to them. That's normal. As mentioned before, implementing live hygiene on sign-up forms, that can be good. It can help mitigate some of the needs for more frequent list hygiene. And just at a high level, it's, you should be doing this quarterly, once every 6 months, and really at latest once a year. But that'll just help keep those bad addresses, spam traps, what have you, sort of at bay. All right, moving into the future of engagement. So, candy, COVID-19, pumpkins, and Apple's iOS, oh my. What's here and on the horizon? So, as it shows here, gotta do your research. Gotta do that research. So, what has changed in your industry due to COVID? Has this had any sort of lasting effects on how your customers engage? Do you or your competitors do maybe less brick and mortar sales and have noticed upticks in online shopping instead? These are all the questions you got to have an answer to, or at least have an idea of where it's going after, with all this sort of post-COVID, post-apocalyptic living. That's how we're going to, really be able to transition our current email infrastructure into being prepared for the future. I know it's been discussed through Email Camp, but have you taken note of how iOS 15 can affect future trends? With the changed pixel tracking, for example, are you prepared to modify segmentation methods? With Apple Private Relay, will your website traffic metrics be somewhat less reliable? Will Google Analytics not be able to track that, those heat maps and how long you're navigating on certain pages? And lastly, with Apple's Hide Your Email, will building long-term subscriber profiles be a thing of the past? Again, maybe not being able to answer everything right now is necessary, but being able to set your email infrastructure up in a way that you can prepare to have an answer for these things. As we've seen with technology, once one company, one platform is doing something, it's likely that maybe not everything will be adopted, but some major aspects will be adopted. While Apple iOS 15 changes affect the Apple Mail app, you never know that could migrate over to the Gmail app or to web inboxes as well. And so, what do we do about it? How do we get by with these changes coming through? Utilize engagement, of course. So use all the data that we've been discussing today and continue to build strong segments for your subscribers. Whether that's through sign updates, even if I don't know if you've opened my latest email, I maybe know that you signed up for my list last week. So you're still relatively fresh on my list. You're still a good lead. Hopefully that can convert to a sale. So, we've really relied on those opens and clicks for a long time, for decades. And it's sort of time to think outside of that inbox and use all the tools at our disposal. What's the point to have Google Analytics? What's the point to have, a really robust reporting from your ESP if you're not going to use it? So, as the topic of our discussion states, avoid all the deliverability tricks so that we can continue to be successful by spreading those email treats that our subscribers want to see. And wrapping up here, we will take some time for some questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Nathan, for that amazing session as always. Let's go and get Nathan in here, shall we, guys? All right, here he comes. All right, guys, let's give a round of emojis for Nathan coming up here, y'all. There we go. That's what I like to see. There we go. What's going on, man? I love the costume.
And I thought I'd come in here and protect you at email. Use my powers here.
Goku, I needed you my whole life, man. Where have you been?
I've been here on day 3, Thomas. Here on day 3.
First and foremost, too, I want to call out one more thing before we get started here. You and I, when we met to do the session, the World Series wasn't going on.
It was
And now it is. And the other thing is, I'm a Houstonian, so. Oh man, we'll see if we're friends next week. So we'll find out.
Sports are important. Emails forever. Emails forever.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, someone said go Astros, so go Stros. But all right, man. Let's see here. Let's get into some Q&A. Okay, I love this one. This is a great one. This one comes from Tom. Tom asked, how do you sell list hygiene internally when stakeholders are so focused on grow the database? What do you think about that?
It's a good question. It's something that always happens, especially when you start working with, large enterprise clients. That's that focus on the more people I send to obviously has to translate into more conversions. But I like to sort of bring up some statistics from previous clients and things like that, and say like, yeah, while you may be sending, let's just say, to 1 million folks, and you think 10% of 1 million folks, 100,000 conversions, that's great. But if you send to that 1 million people, they start reporting as spam, they start unsubscribing, they start being detriments to your reputation, you're very unlikely to get 10% conversion. You're unlikely to get 5% conversion, because your reputation is going to take such a hit that say Gmail reacts, Google reacts very quickly. Suddenly your IP reputation, domain reputation drops, and then suddenly you're only going to get into 5% of inboxes or 10% of inboxes. So if that 1 million email list suddenly turns into 100,000 people, 50,000 people, and then suddenly your reach is just not as wide as you initially thought it was going to be. So that's sort of how I lead that conversation of, hey, do we want a big percent of a smaller list, or do we want a really tiny percent of a massive list? And usually that helps that conversation go a little bit better.
Nice. Okay, moving on here from Tom. Thank you, Tom, for that one. Oh man, these guys, you guys make it hard to pick from these. These are some good ones. Okay, well, let's get this one out of the way because I think it's very important. But important tools to monitor and check sender reputation.
Yeah, that's a good one. If you are a B2C sender, having Google Postmaster, that's like the first one. For the most part, B2C senders are going to have a high ratio or high number of Gmail addresses on their active list. So getting that set up is important. It's pretty straightforward, just a little bit of DNS work there. But additionally to that, if you are on a dedicated IP, getting Microsoft SNDS set up is also equally as important. It functions a little bit differently. They do more reputation about your IP than your domain, like Google does. But as a B2C sender, having those two sort of major factions monitored is a good place to start.
Nice. All right, and then moving on from the WANs, this is a good one from Parallel. What to do when you inherited an account with bad reputation? How do you start to heal it?
Ooh, that's like the $1 million question there. I guess if you inherit an account with bad reputation, you're going to want to think about why that reputation is bad. Is it because your list hygiene isn't great? And as I mentioned towards the end of the presentation, if your list hygiene isn't great and you're hitting a lot of spam traps, then the first step would maybe be to do some list hygiene. Make sure your list health is good before you start making any other amends. Because it's, different places will say different things. Some folks will say, just start over, start with a new subdomain, new IP address. But, if you haven't fixed any of the underlying issues, no matter what IPs you use, what subdomains you use, you're going to fall back into the same reputation issues. So try to fix any underlying issues first before making any sort of infrastructure changes.
There you go. And then moving on from that one. Okay, this one I really want to hear from you because I think this is really fascinating. But Samantha asked, and I want to know too, but can you tell us about your career transition from email marketing to email deliverability, learning and just all that? Because I mean, technically I'm just, another email marketer as well, but yeah.
That's a good question. As I mentioned earlier, when I started my journey in email, it was just sort of, hey, I didn't know anything about email. And so after it sort of starts with my time at MailChimp, and then I sort of at least had familiarity of what an ESP was. And so when I moved into a position of sort of a marketing position, I had sort of I wasn't an expert in deliverability per se, but at least I knew about it. I knew some of the traps not to fall into. The example I used about, be careful of folks on your team that send you a list of surefire leads. Someone actually did that. They sent me a directory of an elementary school and said, "Hey, these are all people that would be excellent candidates." So fortunately, because I'd been at ESP before, I was like, "Hey, this is just not a good idea. This is not going to happen." But sort of being on the marketing side of things and the transitioning into primarily deliverability, it sort of gave me some insight into how a marketer thinks, what are their motivations, and I get it. There's the pressures, like, the initial question of, hey, we got to send to a lot of people to get a lot of revenue. But at least I can now have that conversation, understand like, hey, I understand where you're coming from. I was in that position, but as a strategist now, I'm like, hey, I'll help you make the best decision now. Please don't fall into those traps from the stakeholders that are telling you send.
There you go. Picking up all the way. That's all that matters. You're a Renaissance man. There you go.
Exactly that.
Real quick to mention, Whitney asked, she might have missed it real quick, but again, the Microsoft tool for sender reputation before we move on from that one.
Oh yeah, it's Microsoft SNDS.
There we go.
So if you Google that, it'll come right up. And essentially all you have to do is, if you're, like I said, if you're on a dedicated IP, you'll have to send an email to your ESP, and then they'll just approve of that for you.
Gotcha. All right, man. We got time for one more. We get to hang out for one more question. All right. So Greg wanted to know, what's your thought on having a dedicated IP as opposed to being on an ESP's shared block?
That's a good question. That's something that, a decision that I have to help make all the time at Blue Shift. We definitely get some clients that are not super large yet. And so I would definitely say, if you are sending less than 100,000 a month, start off on a shared pool before going gung-ho into a dedicated IP. Establish your domain reputation so that, if you start to scale and you grow large enough, into those 6 figures of monthly volume, that you at least have an established domain reputation before you start jumping into a dedicated IP. It's really, there's no perfect right or wrong time, but there's no like stress of like, oh no, I'm on a shared IP, this is never going to work. Tom was like, for the most part, if you're using a platform that is reputable, that shared block should carry at least a neutral reputation.
Yep, 100%. Oh man, Nathan, it's always fun hanging out with you, bud. Unfortunately, that is all the time we got today. But hey, I tell you what, whoever wins the World Series has to buy someone around. All right.
You got it.
All right. Thanks, cool, man. Well, hope you have a great Halloween. Hope to see you soon, guys. Nathan, thank you for being here. Nathan, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. You all take care.
Cool, man. Take it easy.